Hey kiddos, this is the second section in Unit 2. This is talking about the structures, powers, and functions of both houses of Congress. Essentially, it's talking about some of the vocabulary words you're going to have to know and a little bit how a bill becomes a law, that Schoolhouse Rock stuff. So there's a lot here, so I'm going to get going right now. There's some questions to start off with, which you don't have to really get into. The answer is that there's 41 total committees in Congress. So we're going to talk about a couple different things. And it's interesting because this is a jigsaw done by my 2020 or 2020 spring class. So there's going to be a lot of weird slides with me and Nancy Pelosi. So you'll see. Okay, first one, the role of the Speaker of the House. Essentially, what the Speaker of the House is, currently it's Nancy Pelosi. I do not have a crush on Nancy Pelosi, but my spring semester students think I did. So this is where we're at. Either way, the Speaker of the House is the person who is in charge of the House of Representatives. So essentially, there is one vote at the beginning of the new Congress, and they vote on who should be the leader of the House of Representatives. Usually, it is the majority leader of the party, but they don't have to pick that. They could have mostly Democrats and vote in a Republican. It's never happened before, but it's a possibility. But basically, she is in charge of deciding what laws and bills get brought in front of the floor or brought onto the floor, which ones go to the right committees, things like that. She has complete power. If Nancy Pelosi wants to put through a bill, wants to impeach a president, she has the power to do that. And people go along with her because she's in charge of what's called the caucus, but the party. The role of the majority leader in the House, in the Senate, the majority leader is the person who's basically like the Speaker of the House, but for the Senate. That's currently Mitch McConnell. Pretty much nothing gets through the Senate unless he says so. The House, there's a majority leader. Basically, he's the second fiddle to Nancy Pelosi, to the Speaker of the House, but they still have a power or still have a job to do. Filibuster and cloture. This is only in the Senate, and it's only for bills. It's not for appointments or anything like that. So essentially, what it is, it's a way to protect the minority party. A minority party, if they don't like a certain bill, they can say, "I'm going to filibuster," which is unlimited debate. It's just unlimited talking and talking and talking, kind of like what I'm doing now. It's that, but on the floor. And there's a couple of rules we can get into, but it's kind of dogmatic. And it serves a pretty good purpose. It's there to protect the minority party. There's talk of possibly getting rid of that because of so much obstruction in the Senate on both sides. So there might be getting rid of the filibuster maybe in the next decade or so. So this slide might be null and void. But anyway, in order to stop a filibuster, you need 60 votes. That's called cloture, which basically just says we're going to start voting usually in about 15 minutes. So the filibuster is a pretty powerful tool for the minority party. It's been used a lot more in the last decade and a half or so, but that's a rule that's ruled in the Senate, but not in the House, because in the Senate there's no rules on debate. You can just talk and talk and talk. In the House, there's much stricter rules. There's a House Rules Committee, so you can't have a filibuster. Speak of the devil. The House Rules Committee is one of the most powerful committees in the House. Essentially, what it does is that every bill that gets out of committee goes to the House Rules Committee before it goes to the floor for an overall vote. And they can make rules as far as like how long you can debate, how many people can debate, when are we going to vote on it, blah, 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 all that stuff. They make those rules. It's incredibly powerful committee. Holds and discharge petitions. So I'm just going to read what they said. A procedure in which a bill in the House of Representatives is forced out of a committee that has refused to report it if the consideration by the House. The petition must be signed by an absolute majority and is rarely used. So it doesn't happen very much. But basically, what it means is that you're just going to push it out of committee right away. Usually, it's for a bill that's pretty popular. They know it's going to pass. Like they're going to rename a post office after a Tuskegee Airman or something like that. Advise and consent power. That's Alyssa and Mason and John in the background, and that's Pence in the front there. But basically, the advise and consent power of the get there with everyone. Hi, everyone. Basically, what that means is whenever the president makes an appointment, whenever he tries to make a treaty, he has to get it passed by the Senate. The Senate has this power because remember, the Senate's supposed to be in a more august chamber. They're supposed to be the ones to help run the country for the states. So whenever the president wants to appoint someone, which is usually about 5,400 people he needs to appoint, the Senate has to okay it. Everything from ambassadors to cabinet members to mid-level bureaucrats. Pork barrel legislation and log rolling. So these are two actions when it comes to passing bills. So log rolling is essentially a quid pro quo. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. It's basically saying that, hey, I'm a senator from Maine, and the senator from Nevada wants to build another dam in Nevada. Well, I don't want to do that. It's bad for the environment, and I just don't think it's a good use of our money. But the senator from Nevada says, "Hey, here's what I'll do. I'll vote for your maple syrup bill to help out your constituents if you vote for mine." And it helps out both people, and usually constituents don't really care that much, so they say, "Sure, let's vote for it." So log rolling is just like you vote for me, I vote for you, all that good stuff. Um, Pork barrel legislation is all these amendments that are added on to an overall bill. So say it's like a defense bill, so we can actually fund the military. $700 billion are added to it. But I am a representative from South Dakota, and I want to get a butterfly sanctuary. It's going to cost $1 million. And you can't just pass a bill for a butterfly sanctuary. No one's going to vote for it because it's not pertinent. So you attach that onto the big defense bill, and no senator or representative are going to not vote for the bill because of a $1 million butterfly sanctuary, because no one's going to notice, and no one's going to notice it anyway. So it's usually okay to push that in. Okay, so here's how a bill becomes a law. You guys know the Schoolhouse Rock thing, and feel free to go watch that. But let's go through this relatively quick. I'm not going to watch this right now. You can. So where do bills actually come from? Bills come from anyone. The president usually comes up with a lot of bills. Actually, the president's in charge of coming up with the budget, which is just a really big bill. A everyday person. The fact that we have the 50 star flag that we have today actually was created by a kid in high school, and he used it as a project, and it got brought up to this house, the House of Representatives. They voted on it, and they adopted it. So anyone could come up with a bill, but it has to be introduced by a member of Congress. No one else can do it. It has to be a senator in the Senate or a congressperson in the Congress. It's called sponsoring a bill. Anyone could write one, but it has to be a senator or a congressman who proposes it. And they propose thousands of bills every single year. You can also have remember how your lunches used to suck in high school? Well, that's partly because of Michelle Obama, because she doesn't want you guys to have like 7 gallons of corn syrup every single time you eat a pizza. Those Michelle Obama came up with that idea. Uh, this guy's name is his last name is Boehner. He was originally the Speaker of the House. Congressional leadership comes up with ideas. Interest groups come up with ideas. There are some interest groups on their website that actually have pre-written bills where all you have to do is plug your name in, the state and or obviously the state you're from and all that stuff, and you can just submit it. Like you can plagiarize, and they're totally cool with it. But the more powerful you are, the more likely you are to get bills through. Like the National Rifle Association is really powerful. They're relatively small, but they have people that vote a lot. The ACLU is powerful because they kind of litigate a lot. AARP is powerful because there's tons of people there. Anyone over the age of 50 is being represented by AARP, so there's a lot of them there. So I gave the idea of the guy who chose the flag or came up with the flag. It's the guy who's right above me right now. He came up with the design for the flag as a high schooler. So we'll just move on. So how do they get in the agenda? There's a tons of things. Like it's a visible trend, like coronavirus, possibly AIDS in the 80s and 90s. Ralph Nader was a guy who ran for president, but he came up with this idea of the fact that automobile industry was lying about their safety records. Perpetual and essential agenda items are another one. So obviously the budget, every year they come up with a budget. Taxes are always something that's on there. Party leaders and committee chairs who have pet projects. The current freshman class usually, so that means like it's the newest Congress people. So like AOC or something like that, where you have to make a splash your very first year or first couple of years, or you may not get reelected. So you try to get casework done. So you come up with something like the Green New Deal. Didn't go anywhere, but it was, that's the idea is to try to make big proposals to try to push through your ideas. Outsiders like the president, budget proposals or interest groups also push through those agendas. those are some examples. Medicinal marijuana or legalized recreational marijuana, Medicare for all, which is much bigger now that coronaviruses can go for anyone. Gay marriage equality is another one, not as controversial as it used to be. There's obviously still proponents against it, but it's much more accepted today than it was 10 years ago when it became legalized throughout the country. So the very first step, a bill has to start in either house of Congress. We'll start with the House here, but basically it gets introduced, it gets put inside of a hopper, like a box, and they submit it and they put in a number. So the number will be like HR 1235, and that is the number. So it's not called, like, it doesn't have a title or anything like that. It's that. So it's easier to identify. So this is what it says. All revenue bills have to start in the House because you and I are represented by the people, and we fought a whole war because of no taxation without representation. So of course we're going to give the power to tax to the House of Representatives. It's our money. So this is the hopper I was speaking of. Moving on. So three things must happen after the bill is introduced. It's assigned a number, like I said. It's labeled with the sponsor's name, so it could be like Representative Long or what have you. The bill is sent to the government printing office, and copies are made. And actually, funny thing, bills are actually officially written up by lawyers usually. Usually, it's not Congress people that write it because they're not always lawyers, or if they write it, they can screw it up because the law is pretty complicated. There's four different types of legislation. Bills, and that's the normal type of legislation that we deal with. It's usually just bills, like any kind of law, like anything that is written to become a law is called a bill. Civil resolutions, these are to create special select committees, things like that. Concurrent resolutions, this is where the Senate and the House are both enacting to recess or adjourn sessions of Congress. Again, not law, but they do it together. And joint resolution is usually when you're like proposing amendments, or you're authorized the president of the United States troops, or you're trying to do something relatively quickly. You want both sides, both houses, to actually be on board. Then the bill is assigned to a committee. This committee, it's a specialized committee. So if it's an agricultural bill, it goes to the agricultural committee. If it is an education bill, it goes to the education committee, so on and so forth. If you want to kill a bill, you can put like the agricultural committee one or agricultural bill in the education committee, and they don't know what to do with it, so they're just going to kill it. They'll table it. Oh no! Here we go. All right. So you'll see that it's usually referred by the Speaker of the House. Moving on. So this is a great video, much better than the one that I'm doing right now. This is Mr. Rogers having a hearing. So when the committee gets a bill, if they're actually going to go ahead with it, they have to do a whole lot of research. So one of the things they can do is they can have hearings to get people who are knowledgeable on the subject, people from bureaucracy, interest groups, everyday citizens, Mr. Frickin' Rogers over here, and they can speak in front of Congress, and they can kind of give testimony and try to sway people and give them ideas. It's like basically an oversized book report type thing. Again, if you have the chance to watch this, it's amazing. They can also amend the bill. They debate the bill. So amending the bill is they can add, earmarks or pork barreling, extra little amendments onto it so it helps out different people. And the more amendments you add in the bill, you usually get more people to vote for it because you're helping out people, so they want to vote for them to help out their constituents. Usually those bills are very narrow. Sorry, those amendments are very narrow in scope. So in the House, most bills go to the Rules Committee before reaching the House floor. A committee adopts rules or govern the procedures under which the bill will be considered by the House. So basically, the Rules Committee makes a decision. Suspension of the rules is usually a parliamentary procedure. So what they could actually decide is the rules say we're just not going to have the rules. We're going to just let you guys have an up and down vote. Usually, like I said, it's for things like if you're going to name a post office after a war hero or something like that. But once in the Senate, bills do not have to go to any rules committee before reaching the Senate floor. Debate in the Senate is unlimited. So this is like in the Senate, they can talk for as long as they want. We've talked about this. And it's a simple majority in order to pass anything in the Senate. However, if you want to filibuster, you need to have 60 votes on your side. So then the legislation is sent to the president, and if it's the exact same bill on both sides. So if it's all done in the House and it's voted in the House on the floor, it goes to the Senate and follows the same process. But if it's the exact same bill, if they don't change anything, it goes directly to the president. If, however, they change even one little word, it goes to a conference committee. And a conference committee is a committee where there's senators and representatives, and they make they iron out the differences in the bills, the two versions of the bill. It goes to the two floors again. They have to vote, and if they vote yes on both, it goes to the president. And the president has three options. All right, he has three things. It says four things here, but three things. The president signs the bill, and the bill becomes law. Super easy. Signs it. We're all good to go. The president ignores the bill, and within 10 days, something happens. Either the bill becomes law if the Congress is still in session. So if they're not in recess and they're still in session, the bill is going to become a law. And part of the reason why they did this is because if the president gets sick or is out of the country or is unable to sign it, they don't want the government to come to a standstill. So they want to have a fail safe. The bill dies if Congress is not in session. So let's say their last day in session, they pass this bill, the president doesn't sign it. 10 days later, it automatically gets vetoed. It's called a pocket veto, and there's no way to override that. Or the president vetoes this bill, and it goes back to Congress, and it's 2/3 vote in both houses. They have to do the same process all over again, but they have to pass it by 2/3. Almost never happens. The presidents have vetoed something like 3,000 bills over the last 200 some odd years, and Congress has only overturned like 115. So not a good record for overturning that stuff. So the ultimate bill is the federal budget here. Let's talk about that. Federal budget's the most important bill because money is what makes everything go. So who decides this budget? Congress doesn't write the budget. The president does, and ultimately it's the president. It's the president's organization called the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, and they actually write the budget for the president. They, it comes up with all their overall agenda. They throw it inside this budget and they give it to Congress. Congress then takes it and rips it up and starts over from scratch. But because Congress has the power of purse, and it usually goes to the Senate. When it goes to, or it goes to the House. When it goes to the House, usually it goes through the Appropriations Committee because they deal with appropriating money, authorizing money. They're like the bankers of the House. So we have things called mandatory spending. Mandatory spending are things that we legally are obliged to pay. The interest on the debt, which is usually about 6% of our budget, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. These things are non-negotiable. This is about 60% of our budget is mandatory spending, things that we have to pay year after year. Things that are not mandatory spending are called discretionary spending. And discretionary spending is everything else. That's that 40% that goes to everything from education all the way to the military. Okay, I already did this one. Okay. I said 2/3. This is an example of the budget right here. You see where your tax money goes. You can scan that if you'd like, and it'll be good to go. Either way, so you see these two, this orange and this blue, that right there are mandatory spending. There's also the interest, and for some reason that's not mandatory, but it should be. So it's actually a little bit more than that. But everything else is put into this little corner over into the left. So military is the largest part of that of the discretionary spending, but everything else is broken up, and you kind of see to the left over here. All right, we already did this. Talk about this again. This is another way to look at how your tax dollars are broken up. Um, it's interesting, but yeah. So every dollar that you pay in taxes, this is where it all goes. Okay, key terms: contrast deficit versus the debt. How is it related? So deficit is how much money you're spending over what you earn. So let's say I earn $100 a day, but I'm spending $110 a day. So if you look at that, my deficit is $10 a day. All right, because I'm making 100, I'm spending $110, so I'm losing $10 a day. So that's a deficit. A debt is the accumulation of all those deficits. So if I'm doing that for 10 days, then my debt is $100, even though my deficit's only $10 every single day. All right. So America has a deficit of about $1 trillion a year, which is crazy to think. Whereas our debt is about $22 trillion, which again, crazy to think. When I was your age, this is a long time ago. But in 1998, uh, we had no deficit. We actually had a surplus. We're now over $1 trillion a year. The budget, or sorry, the in 1998, the federal debt was under $1 trillion. We're now at $22 trillion. So things balloon exponentially. Okay. Um, this is just some backup. I just gave you some of that. This is some history on that. Um, so 19th century, 1800s, we usually had a balanced budget. Few exceptions, usually had a balanced budget. Obviously, the Civil War threw things off. But what kind of led to deficit spending was in the 1930s with the New Deal program. Usually, when there's a major crisis, we spend a lot to try to get our way out of it. So World War II was another one. We spent over $200 billion on World War II, which isn't a lot today, but back then it was like all the money in the world. LBJ's war on poverty and the Vietnam War. So wars are very expensive. Reagan has tax cuts and the rise of defense spending. His idea was to overspend the Soviet Union so they couldn't keep up. Um, Tax increase and economic growth really helped us out in the 90s. And then obviously you had the war on terror. You had the Great Recession. Right now you have the COVID crisis. So that's all deficit spending. And there are, okay. So I'm going to kind of get past all this stuff. I think we're done. Okay, kiddos, this is it. I will see you in the next section.